Hello everyone, in this Passport.js tutorial we're going to show you how to create an authentication system with Passport.js and sessions. We're first going to look at how sessions work all by themselves, then we're going to integrate Passport.js into the app with the built-in Passport settings, and then finally we'll show you custom callbacks so you get full control over your authentication code. This video is about sessions, but there's one on JSON Web Tokens as well, and one on using authentication in a front end like React. So please subscribe to the channel for more tutorials. Also check the link in the description to get a written version of this video, as well as the source code with the fully working completed code. The first thing I want to do is make a sessions tutorial. I have an empty tutorials directory here, and we're going to just make a sessions folder. So make dir sessions tutorial, and then in there, I'm going to go ahead and open up the whole thing and drag it over. And then we're going to create a server folder inside of here. And then inside of the server, we're going to make an app.js file. And then I'm going to put the following code in here. We're just going to get a very simple starting app here first. So let's do that. Okay, so we have a basic app here. Let's open up our server folder and then do an npm init-y to create the project officially, the package.json file, and then we're going to npm install. We're going to need express uuid express-sessions, session, and session-file-store. And I think that's it. And I'm going to use nodemon, which is a globally installed package, and it's already on my system. Okay, those are all installed. Now we can run nodemon app.js. Okay, and that is working. So now let's go to a web browser and go to localhost 3000. We get this get index route, and if I look here, we get session ID. That session ID is undefined, and that's because we don't have sessions set up yet. So we have a basic app working. Now we need to add a session support to Express. And so what we can do here is we can use the session and file store. We're going to use sessions in every single request. So we're going to do an app.use. And then in here, we're going to turn on the session. So we've got this little session object or function here, and it takes gen ID, which generates the session ID. And so I'm going to do a console login here. And then I'm going to say return uuid v4, which will give us a session ID, and it will generate it, and it will make a session with this ID for us. So the next thing is where we're going to store this session. So I'm going to say new file store, and we're going to have a secret, which is I'm going to name it a private key. You can have it whatever string you want. And then resave false and save uninitialized true. We can see that this sessions folder has been made for us. And now I think if we refresh this already, go back to our text editor, now we have a new session. So this is a session that was automatically made for us. And if we delete the session and make this false, save, refresh, there's not going to be a new session. And that's what save uninitialized does. So I'm going to leave this as true for now. Refresh. And there's our session. Okay, so there's a session. Whoop-de-doo. What is so special about this? So basically it's a place where we can store user data. And then we can use that so we could store a user's ID in here. And then anytime we need the user data, we can grab the user ID and then query the database, or we can store the whole user object. And so if I refresh the page, say I refresh, and I refresh again, refresh again, if I go back here, we get, it looks like the same session every time, the same session ID. And so we're using this data from this session on every single request. And so if you have a user stored in here, then that's how we know that the user is logged in, and their ID and their email address and all that logged in information. So we store that in here. And now let's try to close the browser. So I just closed the web browser, and I'm not sure if this is going to work because I have another browser open, but let's give it a try. Localhost 3000. And it didn't work. Okay, let me open up an Edge browser because I'm on Windows. You can open up Safari or whatever you're using. Okay, localhost 3000. Okay, that gives us a different one. Now let's close that and open up Edge again. Localhost 3000. And we get two different, every time we close the browser and open up a new one, this will open up create a new session. And so now in our sessions, we have 3 different files. And that's because every time you close the browser, the client loses its connection with the server and the session is over. And so we can remember that data by storing the session ID into a cookie. And so we can fake that with curl. So I'm going to open up this browser here, and I'm going to go back into the tutorials. So I think it's desktop tutorials, CD sessions tutorial. Oops. Okay, and from here or in the server, wherever, you can run a curl command. And so I've got a couple different commands here. There's a blog post that goes with this video that you can check out if you have a hard time with the commands. But I'm going to add this to the notes.txt, to a notes.txt. And so Windows users will run this, and everybody else will run this. So curl. You also have to make sure you have curl installed, but curl with a -x and a space and a get, localhost 3000 with a -c, my cookie. And so I'm going to copy this because I'm on Windows. And before I paste, let's delete all of the folder files in the sessions folder just so we can start from scratch. And I'm going to close out the browser just to be safe. Okay, so now we can, well, okay, I messed up. So anyway, we're starting from scratch. Sessions folder is empty, and we can paste, and then the Edge browser, all the browsers are closed. Well, I don't think you need all of them closed, but we're gonna hit this route. We're gonna run this curl command, and now we have a new session. But if you run this again, we're going to end up creating another session. No matter how many times you run it, it's not going to remember it. It's going to create a new session every single time. When you run the curl command with the -c flag, it's basically saying to overwrite the file. This is equivalent of opening a new browser and visiting the website for the first time every single time. And so if you want to remember the previous session, you would use the -b flag, which kind of says, hey server, here's my session ID. The server will then see the session ID and that it matches an existing session on the server, and it will not create a new session because it can use the existing one. So let's go ahead and start over one more time. Well, we're going to do it a couple more times, but okay, so I've deleted those sessions and I'm going to run this -c with -c, and we see 994E76. And so we're also using this my-cookie. So if I click on this and we see this .sid 3A994E994E7678, this matches this session ID. Ignore the first couple of characters. For the most part, it matches. So now we have, when we use this with the -b flag, we're saying, hey, look at the existing SID, session ID, inside of this mycookie file. And if it matches, then use that. So let's try it with the -b. Hit enter, and no new session. Again and again and again, no new session. It's using the existing session. So this is equivalent of refreshing the browser in, like, if you had like a Safari or whatever browser, you could refresh it. It's going to remember until you close out of the window. Or even better, if you store a cookie inside of the browser, then that can actually survive closing out the browser. So if you close it out and open it back up, 6 hours later, that session could still be intact if that cookie, that session ID in the cookie matches the session on the server. And then the only difference between, well, one of the differences between what we're doing now and like in a real production app is that we're storing the session with this file store here, and this file store makes a sessions folder and stores it here. But in reality, you would actually store this session in like a MySQL database or a MongoDB somewhere. You would store it in some kind of database. And so all that kind of stuff is hidden from you when we're working in production or in most development environments. So this is kind of like bringing everything to the surface and seeing how it works. So again, this would be stored in a database, and then this mycookie would be stored inside of your browser's, local storage or somewhere along those lines. So that's pretty much sessions and cookies. And so now we can also see how they can get expired. Okay, so let's double check that we're not getting any new sessions, and that is correct. So there's a couple ways that we could like simulate an expired session. So the first way is to rename this file. So this would be like an invalid session. So I'll just take this 5 and turn it into a 6. And then now the cookie, or this cookie file here with the session ID, no longer matches the session in the session store. So if I try to run B, or the GET request with the -b flag, it's going to make a new session because the session ID stored in the mycookie text file represents an invalid session. So the other way that we could do this, let's run it with the C flag again to create and save a valid session. So now if I use B, I'm not getting any new sessions. And we changed this file last time. Let's try to change the mycookie ID. So I'm going to take this 8 and I'm going to turn it into a 9. Save. And now I go back here and try to run it again, and this cookie or this session here has expired. And so now we're getting a new session every time we try to use the app until the session ID in the cookie matches a valid session on the server. So until that happens, until they both match then and are valid, then we're going to keep trying to make new sessions. So that is simulating expired or invalid sessions. The next thing I want to do is make a user, and we're going to store the user's data inside of the session. So underneath const app equals express, I'm just going to make a new user real quick. Then we're also going to log the user. So console.log, I'm going to rec.session.user. Okay, and then inside of this GET request, so when the user hits the index endpoint, we're going to store the first user in the user's array into the session. So I'm going to hit save. Oh, and I guess that brings up another point that I forgot to mention, is that the session here is actually available on the rec object. So I can do console.log rec.session. Let's also spell this correctly. Okay, so now let's try to hit that endpoint again. So I'm going to, well, I think if I do it B, it's, oh yeah, that's because it's invalid. So let's actually just start over. So I'm going to delete all of these. Okay, and then let's run this with the C flag again to create a new session. And now if you click inside the session, we have another object in the session. So this user object with an ID and an email. And so this would simulate a user being logged in. And in this case, we'd have the whole user object instead of just the ID, but what you want to do is up to you. So now we can reuse this session with the B flag over and over and over again, and we will always have access to this user object. And you can see that if you go into the log here, we can see rec.session.user is this user object here, and then we have the whole session in the rec object as well. And so that is simulating storing a user's data inside of a session. Okay, so now that we're done with understanding what sessions are by themselves, let's go ahead and close this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the project, and that way we can duplicate it and have a reference to both of them if we want. So I'm going to copy, paste. Okay, and then I'm going to rename this folder Passport.js tutorial. I guess I should call it sessions, but that's fine. So Passport.js tutorial, and then I'm going to change into that directory. So Passport.js tutorial, and I'm going to open it up. So we have the same exact project that we had earlier, just with a different name. And now we can start working on the Passport implementation of sessions and authentication. Okay, so I'm going to grab my terminal again, and we're going to make sure we're in the server folder. And I have a couple more packages we need to install. So npm install EJS for our Express views. And I'm just going to do everything just to make sure. So express -session passport -local and session-file-store UUID v4. Oh, actually, UUID, they recently did a switch. So UUID and bcrypt. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to need to make a views folder. So I'm going to make this inside of our server, views, and we have a login.ejs file that we're going to make. So login.ejs, and this is kind of just a boring bunch of code. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. Yeah, you can access this in the blog post and or the GitHub repository, but I will go through it real quick. So it's just a doc type HTML and HTML tag with the language English, head tag with 2 metas and a title and a head tag. Yeah, basically you can just see this. There's nothing special about this. The only important thing is the well, okay, so you do need to have a valid input. I've gotten a strange error when I tried to not have the doc type in the head, or I don't know exactly what was causing the issue, but anyway, you want to have a proper HTML format, structure, skeleton, and the important thing is this form action /login with a method of post. So we're posting to the login endpoint, and then this input has to have a name of the username, and the other input has to have the name of password. And so that's pretty much the secret sauce here. So this is our login.ejs file. You can see the whole thing, and so that's it for the login.ejs. Then the next thing is the app.js. We are going to add in a few things. So we've got UUID. We need to get path and body parser. So I'm going to say const path equals require path. Okay, we need views. So we do that we set up EJS like this. Okay, so these 3 lines here allow us to use the EJS, and then this body parser does it allows us to actually read the body of a request. And I'm not actually sure what the extended false does. I've always just kind of taken that for granted. So the next thing is to make a endpoint for login. So, and instead of rest.send, we're going to do rest.render and then the name of the file. So rest.render login. So if we visit the login endpoint, we should get the login page. And then let's make a simple post request. That way, when we know that the submit button works. So I'm going to say app.post. Okay, so we should have a fully functional form, submission, and a view. So let's give that a try. I'm going to go to localhost. Oh, we got to start our server. npm. Oh, do I even have a start script yet? I do not. Let's make one. So what is it? Dev nodemon app.js. That'll work for now. So npm run dev, I think. Yeah. Okay, so now we can visit our localhost. Localhost 3000. And it says get index route. Let's go over to login. Okay, so we've got a hard-coded, pre-populated field here. We're just going to hit login, and we get the login form submitted. So we're in business so far. So now we're ready to set up the passport portion of this stuff, of the authentication. So we're going to hard code everything just to make sure that it makes absolute sense. So I'm going to open up the editor and go back to the app.js file, and we're going to start adding passport stuff. So the first thing is we need to pull in the strategy. So I'm going to say const local strategy. And then we also need passport itself. So const passport. Okay, and then down here we're going to say, well, I'll put it underneath this session. So I'm going to say passport.use. And then the next, so we have this passport local strategy. I'll show you that in a second, but let's go down here to our post login. And the first thing I want to do is make a useless function in front of this. So just to, demonstrate the middlewareness of Express. So I'm going to say function rec res next and console.log useless function next, and then a comma after this function body. Okay, so now when we post to the login endpoint, it is going to first run through this function here. It's going to say console log useless function, and then it's going to call the next function to where it goes to the next function in this chain. So now we get our rec and res, this sending the login form submitted line. So what we want to do is there's a couple ways to do this. We can do custom callbacks, or you can use like the built-in default. So we're just going to start with the default, which means we're going to get rid of this piece right here, and instead we're going to inject some passport stuff. So I'm going to say passport.authenticate, and we're going to use the local strategy. And then if it succeeds, we're going to route to the success redirect, which is going to be success. If it fails, we're going to say failure redirect / failed. And we should spell it right. Okay. And then I'm gonna say the session is false for now, but we're gonna change it back to true in a moment. So now we have two routes that the passport will send it to if it succeeds or fails. So we need to make those routes. So I'm just going to copy this login one, and then I'm gonna paste it twice. So we're going to have one for success and one for failed. And I'm just going to rest send these. Okay, save. And so now I think we have everything for the example I want to show. So the very first step is you hit the login get request, and that renders the login form on the login EJS file. Then you submit that form here with the username and password. And so that hits this post login request here, and then it runs through this useless function, and then it triggers the next function in this little chain here, which is passport.authenticate. And so what ends up happening here is no matter what happens here, this is the end of the line. You can't add another function down here when you're using this strategy. There's another way to do, if you need to do other stuff after, then I would recommend the custom callbacks. And I actually just like the custom callbacks better anyway, but we're going to cover this first. So anyway, the first thing that happens after you hit this next function is passport.authenticate starts running. And so the very first thing is it goes into this local strategy. And so this when it's named local, it's going to trigger the local strategy. We don't need to name it because it's named local here. But you would typically want to have a name in here like login or whatever. But anyway, it triggers this local strategy here. And if the username is fail, then it returns this done function. Every other case, it's going to return this hard-coded user. So we have this return done null and then a user object. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then we're going to go back to the page, the login page. So I'm at the login page, And we're just gonna use this default hard-coded values, username and password. I'm gonna log in, and it's gonna take us to the success route. And then the other thing that you can do is if you go into the login, and I think it's what, fail. So if username is equal to fail, then it will return done without the user object. The user object will be false. Oops, what did I? So if the user object is false, then there's no user, and that signals to Passport that there is a failed authentication, and therefore you go to the failure redirect. So failed right here. So let's enter fail into the username field, hit login, and we get failed. So success goes here, and then failures go here. So the reason that each one is, successful or failed is because of the way that you interact with the done function. So if we have a user object as a second param, success. And then in this case, we have false as the second param equals user input error. Wrong password, wrong email, etc. User input error. There's also the possibility for application errors. And so in this case, we're going to make another else if, and we're going to have the condition of if the username is equal to app error, then we're going to create an error. So let my error equals new error with a message of something bad happened, exclamation point. And then we're going to pass just this error, so my error. So this is an application error. This could be like a try catch, and if they can't connect to the SQL database or whatever, then you pass an actual error, an application error. So now let's give this a try. So I'm gonna save, and we're gonna enter a username of app error. So I'm going to go back here, go back to our login, and enter in app error. Login, and we're going to see error, something bad happened. And you'll notice that we didn't actually redirect to the failure, and that's because this is an application error. And so I'm not actually a professional error handler. I still have stuff to learn on that, but from what I understand, application errors, it's okay to show a user some kind of message like this. And then obviously you'd want to log in the back end some kind of error, and that way developers can know about it. But this is okay. And they would go back to the login page or whatever. But that is an application error. So if you want to display application error or throw an application error, then you would only pass that to the first parameter of the done function. So that's the situation for application errors. The next thing is naming functions. So I don't like having to just guess that this local, how does this thing get called? So I like to have a name. So I'm going to call this login. So now because we have this local strategy named login, we need to make sure that we name it down here as well. So this is no longer local, it's login. So now if we save that, let's go ahead and give it a console log just to say it's named login. Okay, so now if we go back here and hit our login endpoint and hit the login, we'll get a success, but if we go over here, we'll see login named. So this was basically naming your Passport strategies and authentication functions. If you try to mess with the input field, so the keys that get sent in via curl or postman or an HTML form, you're gonna have a bad time because it's just going to mysteriously stop working. So right now, Passport demands and requires a username and a password. So if you were to try to change that in the login.ejs, or if you were to try to, again, post with a key of something other than username in Postman, it's not going to work. So I'm going to say this name, email, hit save, and now let's try to log in. So log in, just failed. And worst of all, there's nothing. It just goes to the useless function. It doesn't even trigger the authenticate function over here. This doesn't even get triggered. And that's because it expects a username field. So we need to add that in this here. So this local strategy can take an object as the first parameter. So I can name this, I can say username field is actually email. And then the password field, not that, password field is actually password. So we leave password out, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it in there to be explicit. So now this should allow us to change our username field. So if we wanted this to be elephants, we would put this here to elephants, and then over here in our login we could put elephants here. But this should work for email. So now let's try to retry that. Login, hit login, and we get the success route. So that is the custom fields. Okay, so now we can start talking about deserializing and serializing users and sessions. So we're going to update our code, and in this section here, we're going to set save uninitialized to false. That way it only saves when the session is updated. And then we're also going to initialize Passport. So up here, we're going to say app.use passport.initialize. I'm not honestly sure what that does, but it sounds like it's important and the documentation says to use it. I'm just going to go ahead and use it. You can play around with it and see if it breaks anything by removing it. I'm not going to bother with that. And then we are using sessions in this tutorial, so I'm going to say app.use passport.session. Okay, and then save. And because we're using sessions, we have to turn this flag here off. So I'm going to get rid of this sessions false. And then now we need to deserialize and serialize the users. But let's go ahead and try it without that first. So I'm going to try to log the user in. Hit login. Hit login. Oh, failed to serialize the user into session. And so this is where the serialize and deserialize user comes into the picture. So we have two functions, serializing and deserializing. So serializing is where you take the object and you stick it into the session. And then deserializing is when you look into the session and pull something out of the session. So let's go ahead and serialize our user. But before we do that, let's just delete these existing sessions and see what happens. So we delete those. I'm going to save this. And then let's try to log in again. Just hit log in. Okay, failed to deserialize user. We should have a new session, but we don't have the user inside of here. And that's because that's the problem with failing to deserialize. So let's serialize the user with our passport.serialize user function. Okay, so we have this serialize user function. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't actually know what this null does. I'm pretty sure it's an error. I am too lazy to play around with this though. So let's go ahead and just run this code now. So I'm going to hit the login endpoint again. I'm going to hit login. Okay, now it says failed to deserialize a user out of session. But let's go ahead and take a look at our session, and we can see that we have this passport object with our user inside of it. So we've successfully, and if we look at our log, we go way down. In serialize user, here's our user. So I'm pretty sure this happens as soon as you call done. So once we call done with a user object, this is where Passport.serialize user takes over. It serializes the user object, stores it into the session, and then we have, I think we would have hit the success page. Yeah, actually we did. We did hit the success route, but we weren't able to deserialize the user out of the session. So that's where the deserialize user comes in. So I'm gonna just copy and paste this, make it deserialize, and then in deserialize user, and once again, done null and user. So I'm gonna save, and then hit enter. Well, let's actually, this is actually lowercase. So lowercase s, save. Let's go back to the login route, and we'll hit login, and we get success. And then if we look at our logs, we get in deserialize user and our object. And so now you'll also notice that we have some fancy functions. So if we go to our success route and we console.log the rec.user, so if we go to our success route, we actually have some objects and attributes that Passport has put onto the rec object for us. So let's go ahead and try this one more time. Login route, we'll log in, and now we see that this rec.user is available, and then all these other things are available that Passport has given us. So we can easily log in, log out, and get the user object. So I want to update the package.json file now, just to kind of make things a little cleaner. So we're going to go into package.json, and we're going to add in a -- ignore, and then we're going to ignore the sessions folder. And the reason for that is because we don't want every time you update or do something, it's going to add a file to the session or modify it, and that's going to restart the server, which can kind of be a pain. So I don't want to do that. So we're going to add this ignore sessions, and then I'm going to delete that. And then we can go ahead and restart our server. So npm run dev, and now we should have a persistent session. So let's give it a try. We have no session now, at least I don't. So I'm going to go back here, log in with the username and password. Succeeds. I have this session now with this user of username, and what route was this? I think this was the success route where it calls the username. So let me try to kill the server. I'll kill the server, start it back up. And then now if I refresh the success page, I still have the user. And that's because we still have the session, and we're still able to deserialize the user out of the session. The next thing we'll show you is success and failure messages. So I'm going to go back to the text editor and we're going to close this out and this one. And then in our app.js, we're going to add messages to the done function as a third parameter. So down here, we have this section here where it's just sending false as the user. But you can add an optional message. So I'm gonna make an object with a message property. I'm gonna say invalid credentials. And then here, when we pass the successful user object, we're going to try to send it a message as well. So message : you logged in, exclamation point. And so I'm gonna be honest, I haven't figured out how to reliably get this to work, and it's been a big problem, but kind of. I mean, you can just use custom callbacks, which we'll get to soon, but let's go ahead and just kind of work through this. So we can go to the failed. So we have this third parameter here. Let's go to the failed route, and we're going to do a console.log on the rec.session. So rec.session, and then in the success, we're going to give it a, I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these. I'm gonna say console.log rec.query. Rec.query. And the reason I'm using query in the success is because it doesn't seem to work reliably with this setup. So it's kind of like settling for this rec.query. But anyway, we have our sending of the success and we have our rec.query that we're printing out here when we reach the success page. So now one more thing is if we're going to be using query parameters on the success route, we would need to hard code or possibly dynamically put in this query parameter string. But if it's successful, I'm just going to say question mark message equals success exclamation point. Oh man, %20 u %20 logged %20 in exclamation point. I don't remember how I did that without doing that, but anyway, this is going to be our query string, and on the success. And so the next thing we have to do is if we're going to pass in, like for failed routes, if we're going to pass in a message, we would want to say failure message : true. And then there is technically a success message, but I can't get it to work at all anyway. So I guess we could have it here and then I'll just comment it out. Ooh, not everything. So I'll comment out the success message, just kind of show you that it's there, even though I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. So we have a success redirect and a failure redirect, but this time we're passing objects. If it returns an invalid user, it'll say invalid credentials. If it's a successful user, it will say, hey, you logged in. So let's give it a try. Go to the browser, hit the login endpoint, and then I'm going to type in username and password, hit enter, and it says success, and then here's this query param that we have. And if we look at our terminal, it says rec.query, message success, you logged in. That's the message that we passed it. So you can use the query parameters from the Passport local strategy in your success route or whichever route it redirects to. So that's kind of, how you use that. And then with the failed option, you could do the query parameters as well, or you could do the built-in, which is this failure redirect is set to this route. the failure message is set to true, and that will allow the done function to take in that third parameter. So this up here, our third parameter here, invalid credentials. So let's hit the failed route now. We are logging the rec.session, so let's do a failure. But it has to be the error failure, not the app error. So log in. I think it's error. I'm gonna hit login. Oops, what happened? If username is fail. Okay, my bad. Login, fail. Hit login, it failed, and then our terminal says rec.session. Interesting. What happened? If we look in our session, okay, I'm not sure why that's not working. Let's go ahead and just try to restart. So I'm going to delete all the sessions out of the sessions folder. And then refresh the login endpoint and hit fail, or you enter fail into the username field or the email field. Hit login, we get failed. And then this time, now we get our messages with an array of of the message that we actually put in, which is invalid credentials. And so it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of finicky. So I don't really like recommending to use it, but it's there if you need it. And I think it's good to at least know about it. Let's go ahead and delete the session again. And then this time we'll try the success route. So I'm going to go back here and keep hitting F11. I'm going to go log in. Username and pass, that should succeed. And we have our query params. I don't know if I already did this, but here is our query params that we can then use in whatever route that we're in. So that's a good way to have a pass a success and or failure message. So the next thing we'll talk about is signing up users. So the easiest way for us to do the sign up is to just copy the login file. So we're gonna duplicate it or copy it, whatever, and I'm gonna name it signup.ejs. And then in the signup, I'm going to adjust this action login to be sign up. So sign up. So we're gonna hit the sign up endpoint, and I think we leave everything else the same. Well, you might want to change this so it's not confusing. So sign up, and and the button too. So sign up, save, and then now we need to make our sign up endpoint. And so we're gonna have a get and a post. So get sign up and get or render sign up, and then we're going to make a post sign up as well. So post login and a post sign up. So when you post to the sign up, we're just going to say you signed up. Well, and actually not console log, we'll do rest send. Okay, so let's test this to make sure the sign up component or functionality works. So the first thing we do, we make sure our server is started. We'll head to our browser. We'll go to our sign up route. Here we go, sign up. And so I'm just gonna hit A, hit go. It says you signed up. So that works. So now we need to set up the passport stuff. So we have our sign up form, and we have our success and our failed routes. So I think those are already kind of generic. So let me see. Yeah, failed just says failed, and success just says success. So that's good, and we could update the query and or the session to give a more specific message if you want. But what we're going to do is we're going to make this post sign up instead of just sending, we're going to do the passport.authenticate. So passport.authenticate, sign up. And again, this one is named, you'll notice. And then we have our failure redirect. We'll say failed. And then success redirect will be so failure redirect and success redirect, and we have this passport.authenticate that sends us to the sign up of the passport. So, but we don't have that, we need to create it. So let's go do that. And this is just like this passport.use login. So we need to make one for the sign up. So passport.use sign up, and I'm gonna go ahead and type this out real quick. Okay, so I know this is a lot, or it seems like a lot, but it's really not that much. It's the same exact thing that we did earlier. The only difference is we're using a try-catch block, and we're using email and password done instead of username, and I should actually change that here as well. So I'm going to do that now. Email, email, email. And it'll work either way. It's just, you know, we're setting the username field to email, so why would we have it named username? That's confusing. So switch this to email as well. Okay, so again, this sign up, it's pretty much the same. We're using a try-catch block instead of, you don't have to do the try-catch block. And then we also do a little bit of a check. So this would be where you would verify that the user is doing things correctly before you provide them a user. So we're checking to make sure that their password is a certain length, that they have an email, and then you would also, in a production app, you would want to make sure this email is unique, and we're not doing that in this. So that's what this check would be for, and then if there's any problem, we just return them to the failure redirect. Otherwise, we create a hashed password based off of their real passwords. I didn't explicitly say this, but these three parameters here, this is like the next kind of thing, and then these are the two, these are represent these here, or the inputs that the user entered. So anyway, we take the password that the user entered, which in our case has been password every time. So it takes the word password and it hashes it, and it does the whole hashing thing, and it stores it into a jumbled string, and we store that into hashed pass. Then we save our user. So we make a new user object variable here with the email and the password, and then a unique ID. And then we push that user to the user's array, and then we write this to the users.json file, which we don't have yet. And I've also noticed there's a typo here, so this needs to be fs, and we actually need to add that up here. So this is not correct. We want to do fs, so file system, and then don't have bcrypt, so I'm going to say const bcrypt equals require bcrypt, and then I'm actually going to kill this users object here, and we're going to pull it in from an empty users.json. So const users equals require /users.json. And then we need to make this users.json file. So that is going to go in our server, users.json. It'll just be an array, an empty array for now. And then that's basically it. So if the user passes all of the validation, then we can create a new user. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that new user, stick him in the users array, and then we're going to write the users.json file, so which updates the users.json file, and it's going to make it this new updated users array. And so then here we'll say updated the fake database, and then we finally, from the sign up, we get to return the completed the user object. And so it should send us to the success redirect, which is here. And I also noticed that I forgot the failure message. So let's add the failure message here. Failure message true. Okay, so let's give it a try. And before we do that, let's delete our sessions files, all of them, and let's make sure this users.json is just an empty array. Okay, so I think that is officially started over. I don't think we need to restart the server, so I'm going to skip that. Hopefully we can get away with that. So I'm going to hit sign up, the sign up endpoint, and I'm going to make a new user with a sign up with a username of A. And then let's check the sessions. And that's interesting. So I am pretty sure we're not actually supposed to be logging in. Oh, you know what? I think I've just remembered. The reason I think we're logging in is because we're doing because we're not using the custom callbacks. We haven't even talked about that yet. So it's going to automatically log you in, and then if you go to this success route and do a console.log rec.session or is authenticated, you should be authenticated. So let me hit this success route here again, and then yep, so it automatically logs you in. So you don't have the control to choose not to log in when you're doing this method here. So now that we have an actual users database, we shouldn't just be able to log the user in hard-coded like we have been. So this Passport use login strategy here, it basically just says if the email is not fail, then return the user with whatever they entered. That's not a good secure login system. We have to find the user, make sure they exist, all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to get rid of these, so I'm just going to leave comments on some summary. Okay, so I left these comments here. Hopefully this is enough to give you an idea of how to use the done function appropriately. But let's go ahead and make our try catch and make an appropriate login system. So we're going to say try. Okay, I think we just fixed our login function. I may miss something, but essentially we're going to try to find the user. So we search through the user's array that we have based on the email that the user entered in. If we do not find the user, then this user is not found. So we send them back to the failure redirect because the second parameter is false, which should be the user object, with an optional message of user not found. If we do find the password or the user, we have to make sure that what the password they entered matches the password in the database. And you'll see that we have jumbled it with bcrypt. So we have to take the password, the plain text password they entered, we have to stick it into this bcrypt compare. So it jumbles this password, compares it with a jumbled password in the database, and then returns a Boolean. If it returns false, like they don't match, then we say invalid credentials. And if everything succeeds, then we pass no error and we pass them a success a successful user. And then you can use the success message if you want as well. So, however, I wasn't able to get the success message to work properly with this without the custom callback, which we're really close to getting to, hopefully. So I wanted to fix this comment. So user input error when second param is false. Okay, so I updated this comment. And okay. And I think we've fixed the login. So the password has to match and all of that. So let's give it a try. Let's go back to here. And I think we're already logged in as the A. So I'm just going to try to, oh, we need to log out too. Let's go ahead and delete the session. So I'm going to go to the text editor, delete the session, and then now we can try to log in. So we have the user in the database here, so, and no session. That means we're logged out. So we need to log in, which would create the session. And now this A user needs to have a correct password. So let's try that. So log in. I'm going to say A, and I'm going to say password ASDF at first. Hit go or submit, and it says failed. That's because we entered the wrong password. So message invalid credentials. So let's try logging in with the correct password this time. A password, login, success. So we've successfully logged in and we're good to go. And so the one nice thing about sessions is we have access to the rec.isAuthenticated and the login and logout without having to actually, well, you'll see it in it soon. We don't actually have to like pass through a second like JWT strategy. Well, let's check out secure route and then logging out. So we're going to make a logout route. So I have a login. We're just going to do an app.post. Actually, well, we can do get. I mean, you technically want to do post, but I don't think it's a big deal. So at least hasn't been yet. So app.get, the logout route, and then rec and res. And because Passport has attached a .logout function on to the rec object, and we are still logged in with our session, we are able to just access that logout function. So we can access it with rec.logout, and this requires us to pass in a callback function. So we can just do function, and then there's the potential for an error. So if there's an error, then return next error. If there's no error, then we can just redirect to whatever page you want them to go to. So there we go. I'm going to direct them to the home page. So you could actually just do a console login here. There's, it's not necessary to do all this, but let's go ahead and do it. So save, and the user is logged in. So let's try to log them out. It says it hits the get index route, and then now if we do a log, where's our get index? Oh, sweet. Okay, we have, I think we still have we still have the session file, but it's going to be out of date. So let's take a look at this rec.session from the index. Okay, so rec.session.user is undefined. I don't have a is authenticated in here because we still have the session, but I think it's interesting. So let's Oh, I think it's because they're supposed to put the rec.user, not the rec.session.user. Oh, oops. Okay, my bad. We've been putting this rec.session on there for a while. So it should be rec.user. So console.log rec.user, rec.user, and then let's do rec.isAuthenticated, .isAuthenticated. It might not even be there. I think because I don't know, actually. So let's just save this. Let's hit enter. Okay, so rec.user is undefined, rec.isAuthenticated is false. So that means we are logged out and there's no user object on the request object. And just to make sure that we are on the right track, let's log in one more time. I'm sorry about this. I'll hit A. Okay, so we logged in with A. Now it says rec.isAuthenticated is true. Let's go hit the index route again. And so now we have the rec.user and we have the rec.isAuthenticated. So we are still on the right track. I don't know if the session is still going to be there though. So you can play around with that. But ultimately Passport takes care of the rec.user, the rec.isAuthenticated, and all of that kind of stuff for us, especially when we're using Passport. And so now we have a logout function that will help us log out. Let's do a secure route real quick. So I'm going to put it above our first post route, and we're just going to say app.get secure route. Okay, so we have a secure route here, and because Passport kind of just does all this stuff for us, all we have to do is utilize this isAuthenticated function, and we can just say if the user is authenticated, then let them in. Otherwise, tell them that they need to log in. So now if we visit this secure route here, we should have, an authentication system. So secure route, welcome to the top secret place, A, which is our name. And so if I log out and then try to visit secure route, it says, hey, you got to log in first. So that is pretty much a full authentication system. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is custom callbacks. And before we get started on custom callbacks, I think that's different enough looking that I'd like to close this project out and start over. So I'm going to take the Passport.js tutorial. I'm going to right click, copy and paste. And I'm going to take the copy and I'm going to rename it. So we're actually not going to start over, but I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to say this sessions-custom-callback passport. I don't know. You name it whatever you want. So now we can open this one up. And we're going to change into this directory. So back out of that and do a cd into sessions-custom-callback passport. And then we're going to change things around a little bit. So I'm going to say, I forget what we need to go into the server also. I've already forgot. I think it's npm run dev. npm run dev. Okay, so npm run dev. Okay, and pretty much the big difference here is in how we call the authenticate function. So if we go down here to the login and the sign up, we can see that this here is the end of the line, and this automatically redirects us to these, either the failure or the success, right? And we may not really want that. What if we need access to the rec, res, and next functions or parameters? Or maybe we need to call something after this. Well, with this situation, at least I'm not aware of a way to do it. So enter custom callbacks. And so instead of this being inside or on the outer level, I guess, as a parameter of the .post and the .get, we actually put this in the function body. And so let's do that. I'm going to cut this and I'm going to get rid of this next. And I'm going to paste it inside of the function body. And now I'm also going to add a rec, res, and next, or parentheses with the rec, res, and next at the end of the authenticate. So passport.authenticate, rec, res, next. And now, because of this, we are able to pass in a function inside of the authenticate. So we're going to get rid of these failure, success, and all that stuff. And this thing here becomes its own function body. So what we're going to have access to is the stuff that gets passed in from the done function. So up here in our login, when you pass done, this stuff all becomes accessible in this little callback thing that we have, callback function. So we have error, user, and info available to us. And we can make it async if we want. And so now we have access to the rec, res, and next inside of this callback. So this gives us a bit more flexibility. The most notable or noticeable thing is the success message is a lot easier to work with this time. And also, so we're not storing stuff in the session. Well, we're not storing messages in the session really anymore, unless you want to. But we have this info object that we can access. So I'm just going to keep it simple for now. I'm going to console log the error, user, and info just so we can see what we're working with. Okay, so we have those, and then I also want to just, so now that we're logging in, now we're doing this custom callback. It's not going to log in for us automatically. We have to actually do the login ourselves. And with sessions, it's just as simple as calling the rec.login function. So that is again available here on this rec, and we have it because we've already passed through this function here that validates whether or not we should be able to to log in. So this has given us like access, I guess. And so at this point here, we're actually creating the house key, if that makes sense, in that analogy that we're kind of using a little bit. So we've gotten permission, we've proven our address, and that we own the house up in the function above. And then this one is where we're actually creating the key and giving it to the user. Once the user has the house key, now they can use it to quote-unquote unlock or view the secured route. The rec.isAuthenticated is the equivalent of a lock on a door. Every time they want to visit this room in their house, they have to unlock that door with the key that was given to them. So we're going to say rec.login. And before, without the custom callback, it just kind of did it for us. So rec.login, and we want to pass in the user to log in, and then the second part or the second parameter is the callback function. So what do we want to do after login? You could just console log, you could do nothing. I'm going to redirect. So I'm going to say async. I don't think it needs to be async, but oh well. So here's our function, our callback function, what we're going to do after the user logs in. So I'm going to say return res.redirect, and we're going to give it a success message equals And we're just going to pass in info.message. And that is so much easier. So let's make sure that we're actually getting an info message. So on the successful login, we would now want to pass in an object. So I'm going to say message, hey, congrats, you are logged in. Okay, and if we save this, let's try to log the user in. Let's see, do we have a user? We do, or I do at least. You can sign up if you want, if you need to do that. Oh. Localhost 3000. Log in. Oh, and did I? No, I didn't, but we'll just do a log in, and as it says, it will say success. Hey, congrats, you are logged in. And so I'm going to leave it up to you to do the whole query parameters and like pull that and like insert it into the UI. But you can see rec.query, hey, congrats, you are logged in, rec.isAuthenticated. So we have the message. It's just you, I'm going to leave that up to you to do something with it. Okay, so the next step is to make the sign up function, the sign up here, also have a custom callback. And the other thing to note here is that if you didn't return a redirect or a response here, you could continue adding functions. So you do something like this. So I'm going to save that just to kind of demonstrate that it's there and available. So anyway, let's go ahead and make this Passport.authenticate sign up a custom callback now. So we're going to take it, we're going to cut it, going to make a function body, and then we're going to paste the Passport.authenticate inside. We're going to add rec, res, and next in here. And now we're going to add rec, res, and next. At the end, we're going to get rid of these. And then we're going to turn this into a function body with error user info. And so now we have pretty much complete control over what happens. So this means that we don't have to log the user in anymore. In fact, if we don't explicitly log the user in, they're not going to be logged in after they sign up. So let's go ahead and make an, handle the conditions. So if there's an error, then we will return next error. If the user is not returned to us or sent over to this part of the code, then we will say this is a failure. So we're going to say return res.redirect failed message equals, what did I do? Info.message. Otherwise, we will log the user in. So I'm going to say rec.login user async. If there's an error, return next. Oh. So basically, this error user and info is just us doing the stuff that Passport was doing for us a few moments ago. So in the previous code with the defaults, the failure redirect, well, that they did this for us. Now we're just having to call res.redirect ourselves. And we have to decide, okay, if there's no user, that's when we send them to the failure. If it's a success, then we log them in. Otherwise, we don't do anything. Or, you know, we are up. It's up to us to decide what we want to do. And so let's actually try this. Let's comment out the rec.login, and we'll just say return rest. Let's see, it's redirect to the index route, which I think still has our, yeah, rex.user and rec.isauthenticated. So let's see if we get some of that information after signing up without logging in. So I'm going to, let's delete any sessions that we may have. Okay, session is gone. Let's log or sign up. So I'll go to sign up, and I'm gonna make my user B this time. Oh no, did I do something wrong? I don't think I did, it just took a second. I said updated the database. Okay, anyway, so we're back at the index route, and it's complaining about a session or whatever. You'll notice we don't have a session. That's because we didn't log in. And we can see rec.user is undefined, and we have our rec.isauthenticated is false. We are not authenticated. We're not logged in because we didn't log in. So now let's try to do this again with the sign up. Only I'm going to sign up Mr. C this time. C, sign up, get index route. Let's take a look. Oh, interesting. So it turns out I made an error there. So what the problem is this rec.login. Well, part of it, this isn't really a problem, I don't think, but it should help you. We want to have this redirect inside the login. So if we're trying to, you know, after the login is complete, we want to redirect, then we should have this inside the rec.login callback function. And then the other thing is we're going to be sending this with a success message. Man, I really got to disable that F11. So we're going to be sending this with a success message, and we need to update that in the when we're sending this back over here as well. So anyway, we have a success message. We're going to say redirect to the success page with a message equal to info.message. And so we want to make sure that we're sending this along as well. So up here, that was in the sign up. So passport.use sign up. Right now, when we succeed, we're not passing a message, a success message. So we want to do that. We'll say message, and I don't know. We'll just say signed up MSG. So save. And so now if we go to our sign up, let's delete the session. Then let's sign up as E. E, sign up, success, signed up, message. Now if we go to our terminal, we can see rec.isauthenticated is true, so we do appear to be authenticated. We get this query message here, and we're deserializing the user E out from the session. So we are fully authenticated with the custom callback strategy. Not really strategy, but way of doing things. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to be notified when we release new tutorials. Also be sure to like the video and leave a comment to let us know what you think. Lastly, check out the link or links in the description. We usually create a blog post to go with the tutorial, and we might have a newsletter or course or something to check out as well. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.